So that brings us to our fourth and last pillar of what we are discussing today. So what matters now, what we understood, it's about reimagining, it's about redesign, it's about reorganize, and maybe even, as John Cao explained to us, a little bit reinventing leadership. But I think there's one more thing that we should add to those three R's, which is regenerate. And it's a distinct pleasure to introduce to you Ruth Andrade. Ruth is a corporate activist from Brazil. Her talk will be about leaving the world lusher than we found it. Hi, Ruth, there you are.
Hi.
So Ruth, just to give you a little bit of background, has a master's degree in architecture and advanced environmental and energy studies. Menno, maybe you want to continue?
No, I think you're
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to say that, we talked about these three R's, but I think Lush, the company that you work for, Ruth, is really taking these three to an extreme, I would say. And I think it's a great pleasure to have you as a last speaker, because for us, you put everything together in this program. So that's my intervention, Michiel, sorry.
Okay. No, I stole your text. So now the main interest, which I like very much, Ruth, is that your main interest, as you put it on your LinkedIn page, is how we can build and energize networks which will create a safe bridge between our dying industrial growth culture and a new culture that can sustain complex life on the planet. Now, I'm sure that a lot of thinking went into that, because it's a beautiful sentence that I have to say to you, Ruth. So, so maybe, Menno, you have a first question for Ruth.
Well, knowing your background a bit, I mean, you're an activist, okay, and you work for, let's call it a corporate. I mean, 1.3 billion revenue, almost 1,000 retail shops. So why is an activist not working for an NGO, but working inside a large corporation?
That's a good question, and I ask myself that question every day, pretty much. I think I'm going to give a couple of answers to this. One is that, the environmental movement and social movements have been quite active in the last few decades. And I think as we begin to run out of time, as we begin to bump really into the ecological limits of the planet, it becomes more and more important that we galvanize the whole of society. And I think if you think that right now we need agility, we need funds, we need innovation, we need creativity, we need commitment. I think the business sector has that in abundance to offer, often more than the NGO sector or the nonprofit sector. So I always think that the kind of stuff that I can do at Lush, like the super interesting incubation lab that we created within Lush, the being able to access funds quickly, being able to have, if you think that I can have a whole corporate machine, it's not a corporate machine, it's actually a living system in order to create change and transformation. That is really powerful. Like for me, being present in, 45 countries, having all of these platforms to talk to customers and to talk to the public. Like I could only dream of having that at an NGO, for example. And I think that's the first one. And the second aspect is also for me, the idea of delivering value and the idea of displacing business as usual. So unless we're really creating the products and the services and the innovation that are still meeting customers' needs, but at the same time displacing more what we call degenerative industries, then I also feel it's worth my time and effort to work in the private sector.
Okay, so what I understand is that Lush takes a pretty extreme approach, if you will, to purpose, technology, and agility. So some of the things that we have been discussing today as what really matters now. Can you maybe start with the first one and tell me more about Lush's extreme purpose-driven culture?
It's really interesting, and it's beautiful as well, because if you see the number of people working for Lush who come to work or shop with us because they believe, because we have shared values, right? So we've created a culture of shared values. And I think some of those core values are around animal testing and fighting animal testing. Others are around, packaging and not using so much packaging and actually starting to become more zero waste in our approach, in our consumption. So Lush is not like a single issue organization. So it's not like we have one single purpose. We even created an umbrella purpose after what I call these Lush causes. So there are many things we care about. There are many causes. But then I've started naming them in order to communicate it better under an umbrella that we call Leaving the World Lusher Than We Found It. Because ultimately we want to have what I call a regenerative purpose. There are other businesses, even IKEA, for example, that have a regenerative purpose, which means we give back more than we take. So in our case, it's leaving the world lusher than we found it. Some organizations call it net positive. But I think having a regenerative purpose at this time, and then galvanizing, your people, your customers, and your staff around it, and really embedded in culture. So it's not just something that you say, it's also something that you do. And once you work for us, you really see those values and those principles and those causes embodied through the whole organization. So the level of coherence, I think, is the most important thing. So not just being an organization working with purpose, but also having a level of coherence as to how you put that purpose into practice.
Yeah. Now we just talked about the leadership and the 6 intelligences. You probably heard it from Joe Cao. So tell me a little bit about the founders of Lush and their commitment to this culture.
Yeah. Just before I say that. There is a word that's super important here, which also came out during the 6 forms of leadership, which is capabilities. So also from a regenerative design or a regenerative framing point of view, whether we're talking about people or ecosystems, building capacity and capability for me is the big challenge of our time. Is really building capability for future-proofing, our culture and for adapting our culture to a thriving future. And I think I think Lush is on that journey of growing capacity for doing more and being more active. And I think this really is seated in the founders. So the founders were activists already. They were quite involved with Friends of the Earth when it started in the UK and the whole anti-transport, anti-road movement. But they're also keen bird watchers. So, they own the 5th largest collection of bird sound in the world. So, of course, they also created Lush to embody some of those founding principles. So, I think, my boss is the owner of Lush and one of the founders, and he's very for him it's really important that we put activists working in the business because he feels this is what guarantees the integrity and the coherence. So it doesn't have to be top down. You just employ the people with shared values. So those values are held throughout. And that is, that comes from them and from Mark Constantine.
All right, thank you. Benno?
Well, maybe from the founders to the employees, because I think a lot of the people that buy the stuff in your shop are the so-called Gen Z. And I just had a few words with a couple of young people over here, and they say, "Yeah, I love the brand," and blah blah blah. But can you explain a little bit how the decision making works, so-called bottom up, at Lush? So these people actually have a say in, for instance, marketing campaigns and other stuff. So can you explain how that culture works for Lush? Maybe give an example or something.
Well, I'll give a couple of examples. So first is like how I started. I basically was working as I had a career in Brazil working with translation and language teaching. And I said, I'm just going to live in the UK for like 6 months. And then I was working as a sales assistant in the store. And Mark walked in, the founder. And he would just, it's so easy to approach the founders, and it's so easy to have your voice heard at Lush, and to create that enabling environment. For me, when we're talking about adaptability, and when we talk about an organization having all these intelligences, for me, one of them is basically creating an enabling environment for creativity and for passion and for action. So yeah, I just approached him and said, look, this was 2004. We're saying all of these things, and I think we want to come across as an ethical business, but we're not doing this. We're not recycling properly. We don't have like recycled packaging. He just looked at me and said, do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And said, all right. And then the next week, someone called me and said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah. I said, okay, then come and do it, you know? And then I created the job that didn't exist before. And I've created the department, and, you know, I've created the policy. So I think that shows how shortening the distance between the top and the bottom, and creating, you know, flatter structures, or I also like to use the word permeable. You know, you create a porous and a permeable structure, so information and ideas and flow and passion can move freely within the organization. And then another one is that for us, it's really important that shops and shop managers have a lot of autonomy. So when you're managing a Lush store, you're really managing as if you were your own enterprise, your own business. And then over the years, we have a super forward-thinking retailer team. They've just been giving more and more power and more autonomy and authority to shop managers and to shops. And one of them is that everyone can choose what to put on their window. So the windows will have a cinema board, and shop managers can decide what phrase they want to put on that cinema board. So the ability to react on current events is enormous. So we've had many examples. I think
we've got an example of that, Lush. We can show it.
Yeah.
It's over here. It's all shops here that we see that have a sign. I think it's a quite recent one.
Yeah, this was during Black Lives Matter. So during Black Lives Matter, one shop, I don't even know where, this is one of those things of Stigma G, yeah, that happens in nature. You don't even know where the information started. But a shop put on their board, please don't enter with symptoms of COVID, racism, or homophobia. And that went viral. And when we had over 50 shops that had that on the window instantaneously, yeah, without central coordination. Totally done in a kind of a Stigma G style. And that's just one of them. So when, you know, Camp Moria caught fire in Greece in the summer, some shops in Germany the next day put a message of solidarity on their boards. When they are doing a special charity event, they can go and change the cinema board. Yeah, it's a hot day and you want to talk about your summer products, they can just go and put whatever the window they suits their local context.
Ruth, can I ask you a stupid question? So does Lush have hierarchy and budgets, as we just discussed?
Well, so my other job, like part of the work that I've done outside of Lush, I took a 6-year break, is I really helped set up the new work movement in Brazil. So I'm from Brazil. So I was one of the first trainers and consultants in sociocracy, holacracy. Really quite, like my group here in Brazil did really pioneering work. So of course, when I'm at Lush, I'm trying the whole time to implement more self-organizations. And because of some of the work that I did together with a colleague of mine, in 2014, we have a couple of teams that are fully self-organized. So for example, my team, I'm not the boss, even though I'm the person with probably most rank. I don't even facilitate the meetings. I don't decide salaries. And then we also have our buying team, which I'd say is the hub of regenerative innovation at Lush, really doing incredible work in the supply chain. That whole team is also managed as a self-organized team. So no boss, no managers. I'd happily go deeper into this to explain a little bit the hacks that we've done to insert self-organization into a hierarchy. Not a very steep hierarchy, but still there is the edge, right, between self-organization and hierarchy, and that edge, it took a lot of learning to learn how to do that.
So Ruth, I also want to talk about technology, because you are also doing some crazy things with technology. One is that you have this application where you can read what's in the product based on AI, because you don't have any packages, so it will deliver you the information. And the other one is, I've heard that you're working on it's called a fairer pet, because there's no fair pet like a fair phone. So some people decided that then you need to build the fairer pet yourself. So I think this is an example of the fairer pet. So my question is it a wise decision to create your own hardware if you're a retail company?
Of course not. Obviously.
I mean, look at the thing.
I think with digital as well. I think what happened at Lush, and I think because we're privately owned, we can do that, is that we had some times of a lot of abundance and really high profit. And then we gave ourselves the liberty to become extremely experimental. And then we really pushed some angles. And one of them was the idea of digital ethics. So how can we use technology for good? And how can we, as a retailer and avid consumer of technology, make a positive contribution to a part of, a segment of the economy where ethics hasn't quite penetrated like it has everywhere else. So we with the fairer pad, we've been talking to Fairphone in the Netherlands and trying to work on a similar supply chain. And that project has just being reactivated. And I think now we're analyzing two things: either a fairer pad with the same supply chain as the Fairphone, which is a bit fairer. And another option is we're also talking to an NGO that does a lot of upcycling of technology. So we're choosing between one of the options, either working with a fairer supply chain or actually just having completely refurbished technology in our stores.
You're actually the proud owner of a Fairphone, are you?
I am. I've had a Fairphone since the first one, Fairphone 1, 2, and now I'm on Fairphone.
You're the first person that I actually met that actually can use the phone. I have some of my friends still can't figure out how it works.
So
Really?
let me move gears for a moment, because we have many. It's a fascinating story, Ruth, and we could spend much more time, but of course we are limited in time. So I'm fascinated by this list that Lush has about these 10 different topics on the list of good causes. And I'm sitting in front of it, but if I move away, I don't know, like that. Here, digital ethics. That's the last one. So what is it more than only developing your own fairer or fair pet or fair tablet device? What is digital ethics for Lush?
So we have a couple of one is ethical software. So as ethically as we can possibly make it. So for example, our current website was built on Drupal, which is an open source technology. We've designed our own till systems, and we gifted some of the code back to the community. So this idea of open source and the commons, and how can the code that we create, we gift back. Another is hardware, so ethical hardware, and this is where Fairphone came. Another is end of life. So we also partner with, we have a little, so we've done things like in our events, we have a repair phone cafe. We also make sure the end of life is done correctly. So we partner with an organization that recycles and resells electronics. So those are like some of the concepts that fit into digital ethics. Oh, and tech for good. So this is also, we have a department called Tech Warriors, which is doing innovation around technology. And this is where the app that allows you to, you scan a product, you get all the information about that product without needing to take the packaging. So for example, in Japan, we were able to use this app to challenge the government and allow us to sell products with no packaging. because it's very easy to get all the information you need from the product just with your camera and an app, of course. So I think that's the part of digital ethics.
So you talked very passionately about Lush and to become a regenerative organization. And my last question would be, if there's one advice that you can give to all the other companies that maybe want to become more regenerative or ultimately regenerative, what's the path? So what's the thing that they need to do right now?
I think for me is to not shy away from complexity. So I think again, as I said, because we're at such a critical time where, if people here know about the 9 planetary boundaries from the Stockholm Institute for Environment, like we have crossed a lot of planetary boundaries. So this is really a time of urgency. So it's not like we can cherry pick too much what we do. We really need to reduce the amount of energy that we use. We need to, green our supply chains. We need to change consumer behavior. We need to use, recycled and circular materials. So do all of that. Do a little bit of all of those things in your organization. But then choose the one that you're really passionate about and then go fully into it with full integrity. So for example, for us, it's biodiversity in the supply chain. We have some impeccable products, so impeccable projects around biodiversity conservation and regenerative livelihoods and getting products from those projects. So I think that's how we feel it at Lush as well. We do a little bit of everything. Like we've reduced our energy use, we've switched to renewables, we have looked at our banking. Not perfect. It's a direction of travel and it's a work in progress. But the stuff that you're really passionate about, like at least do something with so much integrity, then that becomes a beacon to other organizations. Because I think like the time of the lone wolf is completely over. Like the levels of collaboration that we need at the moment in order to make this work requires us to be exchanging a lot more and to really serve as inspirations to each other. And to collaborate at a pre-competitive level. So that would probably be my suggestion.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely fascinating story, Ruth. Thank you so much for your contribution for today and convincing the people to become more, not only sustainable, but truly regenerative.